Okay, hi guys, my name is Maciej Szwed. I'm head of design in Miquido. In our team, we're focusing on creating some good user experience for our customers. And since motion design is starting to play a bigger role in it, I will give you a small presentation about some introduction to motion design. So first of all, I want to say I'm no developer, so I won't be able to talk to you about interpolators and all that stuff. Instead, I will give you some kind of a walkthrough the theory of the basics of motion design in mobile applications. In my presentation, I'm going to use some examples from I found on the internet. Some of them are just randomly picked. Some of them are from Android's Google Material Guidelines. Okay, let's get started. So basically, I wasn't sure how to start my presentation, so I decided to show you the worst kind of motion design I could find. This is basically something like, looks like it's made out of jelly or hanging like on a rubber band here and there, and it's actually, I don't think it serves any purpose other than just showing off for the designer skills. Another really bad example of emotion design comes from my own portfolio. It's made from, I made it some time ago. This is an application for a company for managing work shifts in a company. So it's a pretty professional application, I would say. And here you have that default navigation drawer in Android's navigation drawer with that weird bulge effect, which actually doesn't serve any purpose here. Apart from that, I just wanted to present my skills. I don't know why I did that. Well, but I remember when I presented it to the developers, they were like, "Dude, we have to create a screenshot of it and then transform it or something." So I wasn't aware of the implementation costs. And apart from that, as I mentioned before, it doesn't improve any usability here. So let's get back to the beginning. Like, why should we use motion design? Human eye is actually, we're genetically programmed to draw our attention for the objects that are moving. It probably has to do something with evolution. What moves is drawing our attention more, and motion design is all about imitating things from nature. So probably you're familiar with that famous parallax effect. The things that are closer to us, like for example, like we're in a car or something, that are passing us faster than the more distant objects. So it's about that adding that depth. Some of you probably are familiar with skeuomorphism that Apple had an affair with a few years ago. It was all about imitating things from the real world, like giving that glossy buttons or leather pattern as a background or something. So it was all about imitating things from nature. I'm not saying the implementation of it was great, but the idea behind it was actually something that motion design has in common with it. So motion is in mobile application is all about imitating something that comes from nature. So in this particular thing, it's the laws of physics which don't change yet, at least. Okay, so that would be the end of some bad examples here. Just for a start, some nice example I found on the internet. This application is about being in touch with your intake of water, and as you see that blue background is going up in that wobble effect. So it gives you. It gives you a nice idea of what it's all about. So I'm not saying it's like super necessary here in this example, because if we haven't that motion design here, we probably still get it, what it's all about. But it just improves, it just gives feedback for the user, and it's easier to understand what's happening here. So motion design is all about telling stories, and it's not that like not very sophisticated stories, but like dude, that input was important, that kind of stories. So this is where motion design comes into play. And here's another good example from for that parallax effect I mentioned before. So it's that adding depth, and the things that are closer to us are moving faster. So what moves faster actually draws our attention more. So we see that on the front we have that heading and the text paragraph, which is the most important thing on the screen, and it draws our attention. This is my favorite example of motion design. Here we actually have three different screens, but with that smooth transition between those screens, it actually looks like just being a one flow, one solid flow from one state to another. So starting from recording that note, we see that feedback that the white icon is scaling up and down, so it's recording, and then by tapping that blue button there, we actually see that because that blue button from here to there moves to the left, we immediately know that this note we just recorded is the last one on that list. It's the last item here, so we don't have to look for the dates to know which is the note we just recorded. We know it immediately just because of that blue button here. So it provides the technique called visual continuity. So there's the object we are already familiar with on that second screen, and it moves to the other screen. And we know what's happening here. This is especially crucial for very small devices like smartwatches and mobile phones, that we have a very limited space, and we need to keep the user in the flow all the time here. What are the other reasons to use motion design? The purpose of motion design is that it actually provides that feedback for the user. It makes the whole application a bit more engaging and dynamic. So it's all about providing that feedback and communicating status, and helping users to visualize the results of their actions. So for example, they can understand the flow between two states or two screens. So it also helps to create that meaningful transitions, the visual continuity, and it actually makes the app feel that it's running faster, actually, because we don't have just three separate screens that we're changing, like giving static objects for changing from one to another. We're just keeping the user in the flow all the time during that the task that he's about to complete. Okay, so let's try to dissect this and decompose what makes actually a good motion design. So there was a book called The Illusion of Life from Disney creatives, and they were presenting 12 principles of a good motion in animation. I selected 3 of them as the most important ones, in my opinion, for a good motion design experience. So first principle would be the focal point, which is basically the loudest point that there is on the screen. It's in terms of motion design, it's creating that focus, draws attention, and it's creating that direction, that path for the user's eye to follow. So when we're designing motion design, we first need to answer the question, where would we like the users to look at, and then what would be the next item we would like them to look at, etc., etc. So it's but focal point also supports information hierarchy and gives all the items appearing on the screen a proper order, which I will present later on. This is an example for that focal point. So we clearly see that the bottom left corner, which is the current temperature, there is given the biggest accent is put there. So and even if we look somewhere else, there's the big clock on the top, and it's moving down. So it actually makes us look down there, and then we see that current temperature, which is actually the most important item on this screen, because that's probably what the users would be most interested in. Motion focal point is also about creating that meaningful transitions between two screens. So instead of just loading everything at once, we present the user a proper order of things, how they should be looked at. So comparing this transition to something without any transition, that's the same element, the same screens. And we clearly see that probably it happened to you as well when you're reading something on the web and you're reading an article, and then finally some graphical asset slows, like some image or something, and it distracts your attention from reading. This is what happens. So by implementing by thinking of the focal points on those screens, we can avoid that. I'm not saying distracting is always a bad thing. Sometimes it's made on purpose, but in most of the cases it's not. That's another example from Google. It's called the shared element, and it's the flow between the smooth transition between two screens is made because of that cover album. When we tap on it, it just moves from the place it was on that screen to the other place to the left. So we're actually we're reading from left to right. So it helps us focus on that top left corner, which is most of the times the most important area on the screen. And it also makes it easier to understand the second screen, because we're already familiar with this graphic and we have the same on another screen. So it's easier to understand what is actually happening here. So to sum it up, the first principle, focal point, is all about creating that path for the user to follow. It's all about setting the direction that you want the users to look at first. Second principle to use natural animations is timing. Timing is by timing I actually means that the duration between an animation taking place and starting and finishing. It's also the time between one animation finishing and the other animation kicking off, and also the time that animation takes to complete. So that's probably not the best photo I've picked here, because most of you probably type on the keyboard very fast, but I wanted to make the comparison to physical buttons that we don't give actually in motion design. We don't give the immediate response for the user because it feels a bit unnatural. So when we have remember that I talked about imitating things from the real world that we're already familiar with. So by pressing some physical button, we don't have the immediate response, because it's actually the final state of the button when it's finally pressed. So it's just a fraction of a second or of a millisecond, but still there is some timing. But don't get me wrong, I don't mean delaying, slowing down the user experience. So, but we just don't we don't always want to give immediate response for the user. So. But we also don't want to make them wait. So there's some kind of a sweet spot in between. Like in this example, the calendar application on iOS, from that screen that shows the whole year. When we're tapping on a month, we're like zooming in deeper into some more information, and it doesn't actually feel that we are waiting for it. It just helps us realize that we're like in one flow that we're zooming deeper, and it helps us to understand what is actually going on here. So, and it's in this example we have also some element of user delight, which I would leave for the last slide. Sometimes also quick feedback is crucial for the users. So as I mentioned before, we don't want to slow them down. We want to give the immediate response, but By immediate response, I mean when you're accepting a call on an iPhone, you can talk immediately, but you see how it changes the two options that you have, accept and decline, into just one single option. Okay. What else we have here? Oh yeah, timing is also crucial for supporting some information hierarchy. So when we have that screen of thumbnails of some items in a list, we want to present them in a way that we want the users to browse, to start browsing from the top left corner, because this is in our culture how we read. So by giving it a proper order, we make it easier for the users to read. Comparing this to when we want to show all the list items at once, we're not so much in the control of what the user would start looking at. So even this example without the motion design, we're just presenting immediately every item, and we don't create any path for the user's eye to follow. So, and we also not by giving that proper timing, we're just supporting that hierarchy of information. Timing is also crucial in terms of hiding some latency when we want to load some assets. Here, for example, this is on the left button is the fastest one, and the last is the longest one. So those elements are not only for aesthetic purposes here, but they are very practical for hiding those small delays when we need the application to actually load some assets. So when the song finally plays, the user won't notice that small delay, because he sees that we're giving him some response, some confirmation that we get it, what he wants. So imagine this without motion design. It would be like the play button all the time, and until it finally loads. It won't take, probably it's not a long period of time, but still there's something that we could bring up confusion for the user. So by doing this, we're telling the user that we get what he wants. We just need some fraction of a second to load that asset, and it also makes the application appear that it's running faster, because of that immediate response we're showing, but we're just waiting for the asset here. In terms of bad timing, we really don't want the users to wait for something. So imagine like hopefully the users would be using your apps on a frequent basis, and every time they want to do something, they want to expand this little UI element, it's expanding, and it takes like, I don't know, maybe half a second or something, and it's way too long, so it could annoy the user. But so animation should be fast enough that it doesn't cause that waiting, but it has to be slow enough that the transition can be understood actually. So this is the proper timing here. So we see that what is happening here, that the item is expanding, but we don't feel like we have to wait for it until it finally finishes. So in that way, we feel what's happening here, but we're not but it's not that visible for us. So it should be felt, but not maybe not seen. The whole timing in motion design. Okay, so to sum it up, timing, we don't want them to slow down the user's experience, but it has to be slow enough that it's understandable what's happening. The third principle here is easing. So motion design appears more natural when it's moving smoothly, when it accelerates, decelerates. Probably you're familiar with that, but if not, I'll just quickly explain on that is out bottom left corner is that horizontal axis is the changing of property, and the the other way. Vertical axis is changing a property, and the horizontal is the time. So the property changes fast until it reaches like the 50% of the animation, and then it slows down, so it decelerates. Comparing to the linear animation, we don't want to use linear. We actually should avoid it by all costs because it feels unnatural. It's not something that occurs in nature that we're used to, because when we move, when we drive a car, etc., we're accelerating and decelerating. So this is unnatural. And in some of the tools we're using, there's even a sad smiley face next to linear. So therefore, it must be true that we cannot use linear. Instead of that, we're using easing. So this is an example of easing in. So the same rectangle, giving the same amount of time from point A to B, it accelerates and it looks more natural for us. So we can combine those two, like accelerating and decelerating. So the rectangle is moving the fastest in the middle. Oh yeah. One more thing from Google is that it's called asymmetric motion easing. So when we're appearing something, when we want some UI element to enter the screen, it depends if we want to distract the user or not. If we do, because it's a crucial thing that is appearing, we want it to move rapidly, because the fastest it moves, the more it's grabbing our attention. And then finally, when we see that the object and we lock our eyes on that object, it slows down, so we can read or understand what is this object. And the same goes the other way. When we want some item to exit the screen, and if we're already locked our eyes on that object, and this is the result of our action, for example, then we can move it rapidly off the screen. But if we expect the users to look at somewhere else, not on this element, we'll probably move it way slower than this, because we don't want to attract attention for the user that he's already doing some other task on the screen. So we won't be using that rapid animation here, not to grab attention, because then he'll will start looking at this at the point that there's already nothing there, because the element is gone. There are many more types of easings. So those are just a fraction of them, and we can do our custom ones. There are ones like the spring animation, the bouncy animation. This is all made by easing. Although if we're not familiar with it, probably is in and out or both are sufficient for like 90% of animations. However, those custom easings, they can give more personality to our application and more individuality. So we can play around with different easings or custom ones based on Bezier curves to give the application a special character. So although we don't want to overuse it. So, but speaking of that special character, what else can be done to give the application special characters in terms of using motion design? So it could complement our brand if it's used correctly. So we can think of every UI element as made of some material from the real world. Like this example, we're just dropping a box and it's bouncing. So it's like more playful, fun animation, and we can just, by applying different kind of easing, we can make it look like heavy. So it's it could be probably more secure for the users when we're like doing some professional application or serious banking system, etc. And there's ton of different easings, etc. we can apply to it. So those are just few examples, and they all give a different character for the application. But we always should keep in mind the application branding. So to be consistent with the brand, what works for one application doesn't have to work for the other. So each application is different, and we probably wouldn't like to create this spring bouncy happy animation for the button to pay $100 or something, or in some serious banking system application, or comparing it to some entertainment application. So we have to keep in mind different style and different branding for the application itself. This is a pyramid. It's based on Maslow's theory of hierarchy of human needs. This one in particular is taken from the book Designing for Emotion. So motion design as part of user experience, it should follow that pyramid from the very low level needs to the top level needs. So first of all, motion design must be functional. So it needs to solve some problem for us, and it needs to work, of course. And then it needs to be reliable, solid. So the information we're providing there is correct and it's consistent in performance. Then it needs, of course, to be usable and easy to use, to understand what's happening here, so the user can accomplish tasks. And on the top of it, it's enjoyable here. I will call it maybe emotional, because it's all that aesthetic value, added value for the whole application. So emotion can add personality to your brand, and it can be visually appealing, and that's the whole space for creative work for designers. But it doesn't mean that we can get carried away, because as remember when I presented you my own example, that was like way unnecessary. So we need to be able to justify every use of animation in terms of benefit to the user. So that's just because we like something, it doesn't mean that it's a usable thing, and we should use it in our applications. So usability comes first. Okay, now I would like to present you some basic patterns, some examples where motion design can be applied. Starting from user confirming actions, here is that adding a new element to the list. We see how it affects the other elements, and same goes the other way around. When we want to remove something, it's not just a binary action here. We just don't make it disappear. By just simply, in this example, making it red and shrinking it down, we provide that feedback, that visual cue for the user, so he gets, so he understands what's happening here. Because without that, it would simply look like a reload of the screens, and it could bring up some confusion as well. So we're providing that visual cues. It's also another user confirming action here, that when we type some wrong password, it's a very simple and quick shake animation, and it's imitating something we're already familiar with. It's a universal gesture for no, and the same goes the other way. When we put a proper password, we can just give it an affirmative nod of the head when the password is correct. Another pattern is, of course, those spinners, loaders. It's pretty standard stuff. They are like used for pulling to refresh and stuff, but they don't have to be that boring. They can be way more creative and complement our brand more. So we can do something more engaging here and dynamic. So the user would be more like visually appealed to what's the whole application could be perceived as more crafty. Getting back to those spinners, there's also some research. It's a weird one. It was on a quite big number of users. It was that actually users started to think that the application works slower, paradoxically, because now we just literally tell them that they have to wait. So they just look at the spinner, and now they know they have to wait. So So sometimes the user can think that the application is slower by that. We can avoid it by using some dummy content, like Facebook does. Just by instead of the standard ordinary spinner, we can present how the items in a list would look like. So we already give something to the user that before we show the real content, we show them the structure of items in a list, where would be the avatar, where would be the heading, the text paragraph, etc. And it's so the perceived speed is much like faster than the actual speed, because it's actually the speed would be the same as using the spinner, but the user could feel that the application is running a bit more smooth and faster. And also, of course, when it comes to limited space, especially in mobile devices, we can use those kind of motion design when we already have users' eye locked on the call to action button. Then we can provide him with feedback what's happening in the same spot that he's already looking at. And of course, we can just bring focus, bring users' attention to some element if we want, by applying motion design. So it's like grabbing our attention, like waving to us that it needs our attention. And motion design, of course, is probably the most important, in my opinion, pattern to use is to connect transition to understand what is actually happening here. So we see two different screens. By tapping on an item on the list, we just see that the picture expanded. Comparing this without motion design, it's just a static reload, and we're not providing with some visual cues, especially when we're going back to the list. We may be not sure which item was that. So we can avoid that by applying this motion design. So as you see here, the photo just scales up, and we know it's the same object as the thumbnail we tapped on was in the items list. So it's obvious and intuitive, and it's just we don't have to think about it. What's happening, but it's really important. So it improves because it improves usability, because we just know immediately what's happening, and the same goes the other way. When we want to go back to the list, it shrinks down to exactly to that element we're browsing. So we can proceed to another element if we want, etc. So we know where we were at. Another example here is that timeline application, that we can here focus only on reading, because every other element just disappears here from the screen. It's hidden except for that button on the bottom right corner. When we tap on it, it just lets us go back and zoom out to that timeline. By the way, here's a nice parallax as well. And when we want to go back to the list, we know which exactly element was that where we were at in the list. There are also some experimental patterns coming into play in terms of forms, because forms are not my actually it's in my opinion, it's a pretty boring and problematic stuff in terms of UX. Nobody likes to fill out the forms when we see the screen with 10 different requires inputs. We're like not really encouraged to fill it out. So form optimization, it should be a priority here, and by just showing one input and that simple progress bar here, we can make it a bit more engaging, and we just by changing the question to another, we just can draw gently the attention to the another question, and besides, I think that it makes filling out forms a bit more fun. There's also another example is that that by implying those delightful details, providing this sense of craftsmanship. However, mobile applications, it's not a Disney movie, so so we shouldn't get carried away with that. But they can just provide some visually appealing, delightful details here to construct some seamless experience and giving that extra touch, extra like quality for our applications here. Okay, so but we have to keep in mind that if we're not sure where the item whether the motion should be there or not, it probably means that it shouldn't. So please keep in mind that. Okay, and some things, some pages I'm using for finding inspiration for a good motion design are those, and there's also that from material design from Google on this link. There's a video, there's a short movie, like 4 minutes movie that is explaining everything that I just covered and even more. So I really encourage you to take a look at this. Here are also some tools that we're using. There are more and more different kind of tools coming into play. So I think they vary in terms of difficulty views. So I would say the principle for Mac, the top left corner, is the easiest one to start to begin with, designing motion design. However, some of those softwares they allow us to export different properties as numbers, which could be very helpful for the developers, because when we are just giving a developer like a video animation and saying like, here, just recreate this, and we're, no offense, but we're basically maybe sure that it won't be the same one. So it's for example, Framer.js, it's giving us this math behind every Bezier curves in easings we're using, etc. In After Effects, we have a cool plugin. It's called Squall, SQUALL, and which exports our motion design to Objective-C. There's a lot of different tools that are coming into play. We're just recently waiting for Motion for InVision. Curious how it's going to be working. So I encourage you to keep track of it. And okay, thanks. That's basically it. Do you guys have any questions?
Hi.
Hi.
I would like to ask you about how you track your design when it comes to developed. When you design something, for example, in I don't know, After Effects or Flinto, how you can manage that the developers start done a very good design. Exactly what you mean when you're prototyping.
Okay, so basically,
what's your workflow?
It's all. That's a tricky question. There's some designers of my company here. Basically, it's all about cooperation. So we should keep track of what the developer. We should sit down together and work on this together. If we're not able to provide him with this exact math that I was just talking about from Flinto, for example, when you can export it to JS, there are just those properties, and they will need to. They can use these exact properties, and you're sure that it will look the same. But if we're not, if it's not possible for us, if we're using some different tool, then we'll try to not to mess around a lot with those easings, because there are some pretty standard ones, for example, in Android, and they are pretty usable as well. So I recommend starting with those simple tools, with those simple techniques, with easing in and out in both. That we're sure that it could look, if not the same, it would be very similar at least. Okay.
Hi, you said
Hi.
that usability comes first and that there is a risk of overusing the animation. So I've got a question. How do you know if it's the right place for implementing an animation or if your animation is good enough for user? Do you conduct usability testing for that animation before implementing? Thank you.
Okay, so there are there are two actual answers, two good answers maybe to this. First of all, it's a bit of an, I think, obvious thing that it comes from the experience, and the more experienced you are, the more you know which one would be good ones or not. And the second one is of course testing. So you want to test every animation. Does it test it internally, but then if you're able to test it on a group of users, so they can provide you with some feedback, and you know you can see their reactions of is it actually helpful or not. But in my case, it's a bit of an intuitive thing as well. So you just know it's right. If you don't, then if I had any doubts, then it's easier to just put it back to portfolio or something, and to put it on Dribble then. That, that's it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hiya. So, apart from obviously this sort of more qualitative, obviously, reasons, do you have any sort of research how this obviously helps in terms of more statistics, more in terms of the conversion and stats like that? So I'm mostly looking from like e-commerce perspective. I mean, if you do any sort of projects, for example, like obviously this is more of a delight, like this sort of animation. But then when you look at the sort of statistics or KPIs, like do you have any research whether it helps or stuff like that?
Well, I don't own any like global research, and just motion design is good because of this data. It's mostly because it just feels right, and it's not about those user delightful details that I presented at the very end of the presentation. Those are just an added value, but you have to be very aware of that. You can overdo it. So it's not that of a must in terms of motion design. Mostly it's about that providing those visual cues, so you can help the user understand what's happening on the screen by doing that. And yeah, and then again you can just test it and ask different user groups how they find it, and is it really helpful. You can do some A/B tests on that with or without motion design, and decide whether it's actually helping the users to understand the flow or not. Okay. There's one on the top.
I've been thinking that after a few years of working on the animations and the UI, when you use some app on your own phone, you see the animation and you think that a developer wants me to do this or something. You see the purpose of this animation, or you just doesn't really realize what's the purpose, like the normal user.
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question? Do you ask, is it really necessary to make the motion design, or?
No, because before this presentation, I didn't really realize that there are the little animations that make me feel something different.
And that makes a good motion design. It's
Yeah,
not
and
unnoticeable.
yeah, and I've been thinking that you see always the motion design, or you didn't realize that it's here, like normal users.
So when the motion design is not that visually seen, it's not that seen for the user. I think I would say it's a good it makes a good motion design because it's felt rather than seen. So it provides these visual cues, but it doesn't cause that waiting, and you're not. It's motion design. It's not there just for you to think how pretty it is. It's just to improving. It's for improving usability. So whether you think that this is actually a motion design that doesn't serve any actual purpose. It just looks nice, then it's not a must, I would say. It also depends on which kind of application you're working on.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
So, did it happen to you that like there was no motion before, and suddenly you just introduced it and it changed everything?
Well, motion design is a pretty new thing, I would say. Just like the whole mobile, but everything is moving so fast there. Then I would say motion is a pretty new thing for mobile applications. So before that, we didn't have that motion design, and the user, if it's a well-designed application in terms of UX, it's still understandable, but we can just improve that by implying that motion design. So actually, I didn't actually recall any example that I was just given an application without motion design, and here I would just I just improved it by that. So no, unfortunately.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? I don't see you guys there. Okay, so no, that's okay. So thank you very much, guys, and see you soon.